Say yumma. Coco. Coco Robi.
What you doing, honey?
Trying to learn 3 languages at a time. So I got Spanish, Japanese, and Polish. I gotta learn them all. I gotta talk to family in Poland. I gotta talk to family in Colombia. I gotta talk to friends in Japanese because Japanese is cool, and I want to learn Spanish because it's cool. And welcome back, everyone. My name's Hobbyman Pete, and this is Hobby News, the channel where we give you all the quick info you would need to pick up a new hobby. Tonight's top story: language learning. When talking about this, we're going to be going over our 3 key points, those being how to get started, your budget, and the potential for growth. So grab your flags and get ready to learn. Now, I am a huge advocate for connecting people around the world, and learning another culture's language is definitely one of the best ways to do so among many others. However, without the support of direct family members, learning another language can be one of the most difficult skills to attain, which is why I hope to give you a little insight in how to get started. Now, right off the bat, the very first tip that I want to give you all is that you cannot rush this. Learning another language is one of the most difficult skills to attain, and depending on how much free time you have in your life, it could take multiple years to gain just the very simple conversational skills. Which is why, again, you want to make sure that you are taking your time with this and that you don't get discouraged when you're failing to pronounce something or memorize a word, in a quick manner. Make sure you take your time. Now that I've covered the need for patience, it's time to take the actual physical first step, which is of course going to be identifying the language that you want to learn. Now, of course, there's many different languages in the world, and all of them come with their own uniqueness and styles and their own difficulties. And the most important thing that you're going to want to figure out is whether or not the language that you've chosen is going to be something that's more natural to you and your linguistic skills already, or is it going to be a complete scramble in your brain and it's going to be a very difficult and rough start. However, no matter what type of start you have, whether it's natural or unnatural, it can be done, as every language can be learned with enough time and practice. Another key thing to remember when choosing your language is identify the key reasons as to why this language was chosen. Is it something you've just always had an interest in and you want to learn for your own sake, or is it something that you want to have to be able to connect with some family members? Depending on your answer, then that could elevate the need for learning a language quickly, or you could just take more time with it. If you want to learn a language to connect with some family members and you want to, be able to do it quickly, or maybe you have a trip planned within a year, then make sure you're focusing on the skills that would be most required, such as just some basic conversational skills, and not necessarily focusing on writing and being able to read. Although again, you'll definitely want to learn those skills eventually, but just identify the needs that you want to cover first. When it comes to learning styles, everyone's preference can differ vastly. You have to make sure you identify which learning style would best suit you among the main 3 options, those being auditory, visual, and tactile. Auditory is someone who best learns from using their ears and hearing something. So for example, you want to listen to lectures where someone's giving you the correct pronunciation and you can hear it and it goes into your memory better. If you're a visual learner, this is someone that's going to benefit a lot more from reading something themselves and just going over their own, using their eyes and words to see them. And then lastly, there's tactile, which is physically doing something. And these types of learners are ones that benefit the most from doing things like solving problems and answering questions in workbooks. Once you identify which of those 3 you are, that's going to be the style that you want to start learning with. Eventually, though, you are going to want to incorporate all 3 learning styles to truly and properly learn a language effectively. But when it comes to getting started, focus on just your one. Once you figure out the learning style of your preference, the next step would be to figure out what will work best for your schedule. Everyone's life can be super busy at times, and balancing out learning another language with school and work can be very difficult and a daunting task, especially since learning a language will require a lot of your focus and attention. It can almost feel like another job. Which is why I recommend starting off with small increments at a time on a weekly basis and then gradually increasing it over time depending on how quickly and effectively you want to learn the language. My preferred style is usually once a week, take about 2 to 3 hours to really just purely focus on learning a language and get rid of all other distractions, and do that for about a month. After a month, if you think you have more time in your schedule to learn the language and you see an interest in it, then you can start increasing it, in smaller intervals until eventually, if you really want, you can practice here and there. I definitely recommend that you find and create a schedule for it so that it doesn't become something that you just put on the back burner and then forget about as time goes on. Now that we've covered the basic steps in terms of getting started, it's time to finally discuss what you might need or want in our next topic, that being the budget. Now, the budget's going to depend heavily on your preferred learning style. So again, let's go over the main three, those being auditory, visual, and tactile. If you are an auditory learner, then the good news is that this will probably be the cheapest form for you, as there are a multitude of free apps that are available on the App Store that will come with voices, and they will be able to guide you through proper pronunciation, and they can read to you certain sections so that you can hear it and it'll stay within your knowledge better and more effectively for those that are auditory learners. If you are someone that is more of a visual learner, then the best recommendation I have is to purchase books such as dictionaries and read-alongs that will give you a clear sense of reading, and you'll be able to learn at your own pace just by reading certain segments at a time. The apps that I previously mentioned for auditory can also be a great tool for you, but be careful not to become overwhelmed by the amount of options that can be available on those apps, as once you start them, you'll tend to find yourself following a pattern that the app has, and it may not be beneficial to you. So be sure that you're doing things on your own time and work for your method the best. And lastly, if you are a tactile reader, you're going to want to focus on things that can help you actually do problems and use your mind and hands a bit more. For this, I recommend buying workbooks rather than just dictionaries that will give you questions for you to answer and you'll have to think about. As a bonus, I highly recommend that you read all the questions and your answers out loud to help you with pronunciation, so you can do that more often. The books for both the tactile and the visual learners, these dictionary/workbooks, will always run you around the $5 to $20 range on, say, Amazon. There's a lot of QuickBooks, and after you complete those, and if you feel you want something more, I would check your local library or Barnes and Nobles to buy more extensive, larger books with either more problems or a higher level of education for you that you may need. But again, take things slowly and take things one book at a time. Again, I want to remind you that even though I'm focusing on 3 separate learning styles, ultimately you're going to want a combination of all 3 if you want to learn a language effectively. You are going to want to practice with auditory, where you're going to hear pronunciation so you can learn it better. You're also going to want to read and study different words and vocabulary. And of course, you're going to want to practice not only just writing them in answers, but you're going to want to practice speaking to someone to see if your pronunciation is proper or whether or not you're actually saying something that makes sense. Another thing that I recommend the most out of all sources of learning a language is taking an actual class. Now, I know many of you may be discouraged, as perhaps in the past when you went to school you may have taken a language for a class, be it in high school or college, whatever grade and level you took it at, and you think that they were completely useless and they didn't help you learn at all. And the thing that I want to draw to your attention is that depending on the nature of how you took that course, it may not have been your choice. A lot of courses or schools, I should say, require that you take an extra language, so if by doing it by force, a lot of your interest could be dulled after quite some time. The other aspect that you have to keep in mind when it comes to learning from a course is that if you do this, and if you're someone who isn't in school anymore, you would be able to do this as your only form of learning and accompany it with a job or whatever else you're doing in life right now. And you'll begin to realize that if you're just taking one class and you're learning one thing at a time, you'll be able to put a lot more attention and focus into it, and it will feel more enjoyable to you as something as a skill to learn rather than a task or a job that you have to begrudgingly do. So I would definitely recommend, if it's in your budget, to sign up for a course either virtually or physically somewhere. Be sure to look into online courses available in my area, and you'll see what you can find. Again, do things that can serve your budget the best. Unfortunately, because classes can vary so wildly across the world, I can't really give an estimate as to how much that will run you. So again, you'll just have to do your own research and determine if that's in your budget. But if you can do it, I definitely recommend it. And finally, we've reached our final topic, which is the potential for growth. And I've got to be honest, there isn't really much to talk about here. Learning a language is one of the most difficult things you can do in life in terms of attaining a skill. But once you do, the only thing you really have to do is upkeep and keep practicing it so that you don't lose it. Just like any other skill, if you don't practice, over time it will begin to fade and you may begin to forget things, which is why I just recommend you constantly practice and study it every once in a while so that you make sure you maintain that skill. Or if you're coming into a new family where that language is spoken often, just make sure to speak it as often as you can, and you'll be surprised that you're always going to learn something as you grow older. I mean, even right now, for those, whatever your native language is, do you really think that you're a master at it? Language is something that's always evolving, and no matter how many years you spend, there's always going to be new vocabulary and inflections to learn, so it's just a matter of upkeeping with it and making sure it doesn't fade. And that's all we have time for today here at Hobby News. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you were able to learn something new. And just maybe, you're ready to be bilingual, trilingual, or however many ingwals yourself. Be sure to subscribe to see what hobby we cover next. And when it comes to hobbies, write down in the comments below, what do you do? And I'll see you next time.